Here we have words the left uses against us. It controls your thoughts by controlling your language. Are you fucking... I mean, kind of been my wheelhouse for the past 3 decades. Well, more so 2.5. Words the left uses against us. It controls your thoughts by controlling your language. Now, I wonder if people out there that have disparaged the ever-living shit out of yours truly, that have slandered me all across the internet for arguing that you are controlled by the concepts you think with. I wonder now what they're going to say about Jared Taylor. It's interesting. It's really fascinating because Jared just started a new X account and already has like 70,000 followers. But no, me? No. I talk about the whole thing, the whole spiel. And people say, no, it's not true. I can consciously think whatever I want. It's nothing about, you're not controlling thoughts or nothing like this. Jason's been arguing this forever. Now what will happen now that Jared Taylor has said it? We got Bill Ackman saying, oh, yeah, the Jason guy's right. We got, without mentioning me. Jared Taylor, oh, the Jason guy's right without mentioning me.
Hello.
And I like Jared Taylor. You all know what's going on here.
I'm Jared Taylor with American Renaissance. The internet censors hate my videos. If you like this one, I hope you'll send the link to a lot of people. In his famous essay, Politics and the English Language, George Orwell wrote that the English language was becoming a catalog of swindles and perversions. He added that the slovenliness of our language makes it easier for us to have foolish thoughts. And that, dear viewer, was...
And that is not going far enough. I've talked about that before, but...
in 1946. The left has a genius for swindles and perversions. It's always inventing new words in its fight against reality. A pioneering example was the word racism. It didn't exist until 1934, when a German Jewish medical scientist, Magnus Hirschfeld, wrote a book which was translated into English with the title Racism.
We've talked about that many a times. There are some disputes about where exactly and who exactly said the first and popularized, obviously Hirschfeld popularizing it. So talked about that many times. I guess now it has value. Shut the fuck up, Jason. Shut up. Jared Taylor's talking. Shut the fuck up. Doesn't matter that you've been arguing this forever and the importance of it. And producing results against it, more importantly.
It may be hard to believe, but the United States managed to institute and abolish slavery, set up Jim Crow, and segregate schools and neighborhoods without once using a word that society considers indispensable today. How did we manage? Since then, the word has had a very good career. This is a graph of the word's percentage of all words used in American books since the word was invented. This is a percentage, so it's a direct measure of the popularity.
You know, one thing that might be true is that more people might find an argument that, hey, let's just look at the power they wield and the popularity of their meme pathogens. Let's just look at the popularity. Okay, now do you feel better? You know a little bit about this, and you've learned it from a guy much more intelligent and educated than you are. And so, yay for you. More people will probably want to see that than somebody like me who shows up and says, here's exactly how it works, and here's how we undermine it. Let's get to work.
The word, not of the increase in the number of books. The data are from Google Books. Unfortunately, they don't go past 2019. As you can see, the word really took off in the 1960s during the civil rights movement and has been climbing steeply since 2012. It's a real pity we don't have data after the May 25, 2020 martyrdom of George Floyd. There must have been a huge surge since then. However, racism has lost a lot of its sting through overuse. If everything's racist, nothing is racist.
I disagree with
white supremacy is in.
That's been I disagree with that. It absolutely has the power, continues to have the power to cause people to lose their jobs, to lose their loved ones, to be so. It's just, this is wishful thinking on the part of people in the white sympathetic sphere, that the concept racist has lost some of its power.
In vogue because it evokes slavery and lynching. It's a real word, which goes back to before 1900 and means whites ruling over non-whites, as in colonialism. It's shooting up now with no end in sight. Institutional racism was invented in the late 1960s, but it took another 20 years for liberals to discover systemic racism, which is coming on strong, but neither can compete with the emotional power of white supremacy. And neither of these newfangled, invented forms of racism, systemic or
Doom documenting, Sloth says, absolutely.
Institutional, can compete with white privilege, the orange line, which goes all the way back to the 1980s. Implicit bias, the blue line, didn't really take off until 2000, but it has surged ahead of the venerable institutional racism. Very impressive. Remember, not one of these words even existed before 1960. And
can you imagine, Jared Taylor, I don't know how many views are on this video and on this article. I have no way to find out, but it's probably like 20 times me talking about this and explaining how to fight back successfully with proof of that success. So again, evidence of the white race sucking.
And everyone is a lefty invention. Enslaver and enslaved person have hit the big time, especially since 2015. The left loves these words because it thinks slave sounds like a permanent, inherent status, whereas enslaved person puts the emphasis on person, and enslaved is supposed to sound like an evil imposition. Enslaver is the nasty new word for slaveholder, and is supposed to make it sound like anyone who owned a slave, even if he just inherited one, was an enslaver out in the jungle catching black people. Now I'll add the traditional term slaveholder to the comparison. As you can see, it had a tremendous surge during the civil rights era and was no doubt a reminder to white people about how bad their ancestors were and encouraged them to accept new laws and to get used to race preferences for blacks. Slaveholder.
So did you all learn this? Did you all learn this? And you having success with this? Is that right? Can I get an amen? Can I get a hoorah? Can I get a damn right? I appreciate Jared Taylor making this video and this article being posted on UNS, but I'm going to guess that UNS is never going to publish anything about yours truly. I'm going to go ahead and guess that there'll still never be an opportunity to present at American Renaissance. In fact, I think that Gad Saad is more likely to be an invited speaker, whether he would do it or I think he would not do it, but to be an invited speaker to AmRen. And again, like I said, I like Jared Taylor. This is just a reality.
Then began to drop out of sight, but started coming back in the 1990s. This is what you get if you combine slaveholder and enslaver. Isn't it curious that the further we get from real slaveholders, the more we talk about them? Well, there's no mystery in that. Talking about slavery is one of the best.
Isn't that funny? It's so funny that the further we get away from slaveholders, we talk more about them. I mean, the anti-whites inflict that mean pathogen on us increasingly to white guilt us. And we have the tools to resist them.
Best ways to soften up white people for reparations, minority status, and general humiliation and dispossession. Here's an interesting comparison. The relative frequencies of Negro, capitalized and lowercase, all the way back to 1890. As you can see back then, a lowercase n, the blue line, was more common, but uppercase n took off in the 1920s and hit its peak in 1970, and then crashed. Negro suddenly went out of fashion. You can throw in black for comparison. It used to be mostly just a color, but as Negro went out of fashion, it became a race and has gone from strength to strength. Racism, as we know, almost always means bad white people. Are there words for racism?
You know, I've heard so many speeches like this, and then afterward, everybody's talking about like the little details of the speech, like how did it become? How did this word go from that to? I think it was because X, Y, and Z, and these are like the big. And then everybody goes home back to their lives, and they wait again another 12 months to get back together for another conference to do the same stuff all over again. I can appreciate the good works in defense of our victimization and be critical of where it falls on its fucking face and be angry that tools that succeed against our victimization are not only intentionally ignored. In other words, people are aware of them, but they ignore them, but undermine them.
Racism against white people? I can think of only reverse racism and anti-white racism. And at least reverse racism is making a little headway. To throw in black for comparison. It used to be mostly just a color, but as Negro went out of fashion, it became a race and has gone from strength to strength. Racism, as we know, almost always means bad white people. Are there words for racism against white people? I can think of...
Are there words? Are there words? Are there words? I know I got something. Let me think. Where did I think that I have been at work on something for 30 years. Let me see if I can find somewhere around here. I might have a word for discrimination against white people, for persecution of white people, for racism against somewhere. Let's see. Where is it? I don't know. You'll have to come back. You'll have to come back and maybe I'll find those words. I haven't watched this video, so let's see. Maybe Jared Taylor says next, but I think one of you would have told me if this would have happened. Somebody would have reached out to me that he says, actually, there is. My good friend, Jason Kuna, goes by No White Guilt. He pushes anti-whiteism, and he's been doing that for a long. Maybe he says that next. I honestly haven't listened to it. Maybe he says that next.
Only reverse racism and anti-white racism. And at least reverse racism is making a little headway. But look at this. Compared to...
He's heard of anti-white racism? I've never pushed. I've always been critical of that. Only acceptable for vagues who are taking a step in the direction of saying anti-whiteism.
Racism, these words occur at a statistical rate of 0. The right is no match for the left. Let's have a little fun with some other expressions the left invented.
The right is no match for the left. What have we done here? How have you changed your lives intentionally? How have we changed the story reported by mainstream media? A policy at a police department. Are we a match?
How about toxic masculinity? It's a brand new discovery, coming along very nicely. Let's add a few phobias, because as time goes on...
The sarcasm, he's putting it on pretty rich.
We apparently become frightened of more and more things, such as transphobia, which is a young word, but off to a fine start. To that, let us add Islamophobia, which was discovered about the same time, but is clearly a winner. But it's a piker compared to xenophobia. And look at that pedigree, all the way back to the 1930s. Look out for homophobia, though, which lefties invented way back in the 1970s. Look at this upstart, intersectionality. It wasn't heard of until 1995, but lefties now can't do without it. Still, the leader of this pack remains white supremacy. Of all the things we're supposed to hate, white supremacy is the worst. Well, not quite. Add the various spellings and capitalizations of...
You know what you're missing here, of course, is the whole picture. What are all of these concepts? What are they all in service to? What do they create in the social tapestry as a social morality? How do you contend with that? We have those answers. I'm not saying that he's failing because he has no way of knowing. He's doing this specifically. I'm asking those questions for you.
Of anti-Semitism, and look what you get. My, oh my, it's number one, and nothing else comes close.
Look at, okay, so that's anti-Semitism. It's usage. Do you condemn? This is the real test. Do you condemn Jews for pushing and popularizing the concept anti-Semitism? Or do you recognize that here we have a winning strategy? It's going to say a lot about you and where you put your focus. Do you hate Jews rather than love white people? Again, and pointing out for those thick-skulled morons, there are a lot of powerful anti-white Jews, without question. Do you hate Jews more than, in fact, the vast majority don't love white people at all.
And the problem appears to be getting worse by the minute. Even the perennial all-purpose racism there in blue is way behind. Let's look at a few more ways the language has changed. I'll take anti-Semitism and racism off the chart so you can see everything else better. And instead, I'll add the homeless in blue. As you can see, they got a lot of attention from about 1980 to 1995, but the order for them cooled, just as we discovered intersectionality, white supremacy, and assorted phobias. And weren't there any homeless before 1980? Of course, but we call them bums, winos, derelicts. They were all promoted to homeless, which is more sensitive, you see, and makes it sound as though they used to live in beautiful homes that blew down in a hurricane. Here, for example, is how homeless person suddenly appeared around 1980 and has eclipsed.
What's also missing is the point of these words, and in particular, I think, with homeless and now unhomed. The whole purpose of it is to divest the white race, to victimize us, to white guilt us. That's the purpose of it. See, this sort of academic approach can lead people, and I've witnessed it, to conclude that there are no ill intentions or few ill intentions, mostly just society just doing what it does, making up words, and what can you do?
Wino. Well, there's great news on mental retardation. It looks like we've cured the problem. Well, no, we just changed the way we talk about it. I figured the new sensitive lingo would be mental handicap and learning disability, but that.
Why would something like the word retarded, why would that be discouraged? Because it's one of our norms, a classification for a level of ability, almost entirely IQ, but there are other ways of measuring that we say are below the standard, below the norm, below the average. So it's an attack on us to get rid of the word.
That doesn't really make up for it. Apparently, the new expression is intellectual disability, though that doesn't seem to cover it either. Maybe modern talk about autism and ADHD takes up some of the slack. I suspect we are getting both mentally unhealthier and inventing more ways to talk about it. So the left does tricky things with language. It softens the words we use for people for whom the left thinks we don't care enough about. Bums become the homeless, and mental retards have an intellectual disability. But the real genius of the left is in deciding to hate something ancient and normal, inventing a new name for it and calling it a moral failing. It's normal to think homosexuality is abnormal and to hope your children don't turn out that way. But now there is a moral failing known as homophobia. It's normal to notice that foreigners are different from us and to prefer our own people, but that's xenophobia. It's normal to notice race and prefer one's own.
Now, I want you to imagine that you go into a conversation and you try to tell your boss or coworker that, hey, it's normal to be racist. It's normal to be homophobic. It's normal to be xenophobic. I want you to imagine how that would, probably don't have to imagine long. You got that pink slip, right?
Race, but that's racism, etc., etc. We don't have words to describe normal people because we never needed words for them. We don't have a special expression for people who put their pants on one leg at a time. At least for
This is why we account for it with our meme curatives.
Now, there is no word that implies it is a crime to love your own children more than you love other people's children. But it's easy to imagine.
Why would you want an abstract term that it is normal to love your own people more, or your own children more than another person's children? Why would you want an abstraction for that? Because you are submitting to the anti-white narrative and the anti-white immoral imperative that is the social morality of the West. And maybe that's the best way to say it. It is an admission that you are functioning in and with and among people who practice, as a consequence of being alive in the West today, the anti-white immoral imperative as the social morality of the West. It is an admission. You have to contend with that. You can't say, let's find an abstraction so that a black guy can love his kids more than other people's kids, and therefore so can I.
In some lefty collectivist child-rearing society in which it was a crime. People who suffered from that disorder might be called familists and be scorned and canceled. And what would they call themselves? There's no word for.
People would call themselves what?
Normal to notice race and to prefer one's own race, but that's racism, etc., etc. We don't have words to describe normal people because we never needed words for them. We don't have a special expression for people who put their pants on one leg at a time. At least for now, there is no word that implies it is a crime to love your own children more than you love other people's children. But it's easy to imagine some lefty collectivist child-rearing society in which it was a crime. People who suffered from that disorder might be called familists and be scorned and canceled.
Familists.
And what would they call themselves? There's no word for normal people. It's the crazy new leftist disorders that need names. You could call people who put the
anti-whiteism, anti-white. You don't abstractionize the defense. Now, I have great respect for all. Jared is obviously super bright guy, and great respect and gratitude for all that he's done in defending us and all that he has invented and come up with, and all of the shows that he has been on, defending and attempting to defend our people. Great respect and gratitude for all of that. I can have all of that sentiment and at the same time be furious over having a remedy that is utterly ignored by the sophisticates. Apparently on Political Cesspool last night, this happened on Political Cesspool, but James shared that when he was talking to Ron Unz, that he spoke with Jared Taylor about Ron Unz coming on and shared all of the glowing words about Ron's genius and how you can disagree with him and he'll have a debate with you and beat you in that debate every single time. All of this fawning over the intelligence of Ron Unz. And perhaps he sounded like a learned guy in the interview last night, but does he have a remedy for people, for white people in their lives? Are they taking back their own lives? Are they mending the relationships with family members that were lost because of these other tactics of defend us by hating on another race of people, by endlessly talking about how bad the other race is, or abstractionizing everything so that it's this remote notion that no one defends because nobody owns it? Tragedy of the commons. But nothing here.
Interests of other races or of foreigners ahead of theirs, ethno-masochists or xenophiles. But Google Books has never heard of these words.
Yeah, could you imagine wanting to break out the abstraction and use ethno-masochist? I remember back in the day, I tried ethno-masochist abundantly. I learned it at an AMREN conference. And I tried it abundantly. This great new abstraction. Guess how successful it was? My sincere efforts. And that's why Google Books says it's not even real.
Good luck trying to popularize toxic femininity. This is really just another way of measuring media dominance. Those who control the words we use control the thoughts we think.
Okay, so the anti-whites control the media, or specifically Jews who are anti-white control them. I know they're in the US, 5 major companies. I get all of that. I heard all that probably before you were alive. I get all that. So they control it. So we're just measuring how awesome they are. And this is no slight on Jared. But this is, I go about it a different way. I say, okay, they control the media, anti-whites control the media, or dominate the media, anti-whites of all races, not just Jewish anti-whites. And look at Elon Musk. So you have anti-whites of all backgrounds, and they control all. So what do we control? What can we do? Where can we make a difference? Does that seem like, as white people, does that seem like the thought process you shouldn't have? I just don't. What the hell? Why isn't the natural thought process for every single white person, all right, here's the lay of the land. What can we do?
What did Orwell call the English language in 1946? A catalog of swindles and perversions. In this century, I would go further than Orwell when he said the slovenliness of our language makes it easier for us to have foolish thoughts. The viciousness of our language makes it easier for us to have self-destructive, even suicidal thoughts. Thank you for watching.
All right, so we cover all of that, have been doing that for a long time.